Hello. I am here to do another hexagram pair analysis, and I'm going to start just with some thoughts. I've been thinking a lot lately about the difference between life and the forms that life takes. Um, so form is important. It gives life shape. And forms also have this tendency to sort of outlive the conditions that created them. An example would be a seed. Like a seed is a form that contains the whole life of the plant. But it gets broken through and discarded or decomposed, um, consumed in the process of the plant growing. A cocoon carries a caterpillar from its goo into this butterfly form, right? And that cocoon is discarded. So it's kind of what I mean by this outgrowing. This is a living example. The inevitable thing, right, in the natural world that is that they will be outgrown. The growth happens also in this dark place, right? Unseen inside the vessel. When we watch, for example, a snake shedding its skin, the transformation or the growth that is taking place of that snake is really kind of invisible to us. The only evidence we have is that eventually that outer skin becomes impossible to inhabit, and it sort of sloughs off, it decomposes off of the snake. Um, and so I've been looking at hexagrams 49 and 50. This is the artwork I've done for 49. We see here sort of like a sunrise over the lake, and its title is Revolution. All other names for it are skinning or molting or shedding. That idea of the snake or the cocoon or being sort of discarded, right? Due to growth. And then we have hexagram 50, which is the vessel, the sacrificial bowls, the cauldron. These are words that have been used for this one. And if you look at these together, there's sort of this ritual sequence for spiritual growth described, a story that they tell that they're both part of. And you'll see that the colors are very similar in these. I use a color system in my cards. Yellow is the sun and green is air in my system that I have developed. And so we have a yellow sun reflecting in sunrise onto the lake. And we have the yellow fire. This is the sun is a fire in this case because this is a very, we'll see later, a very spiritual or sacred fire. And then the wood is the air. Or maybe, the air is the air, but we have wood beneath the fire because wood is often synonymous in its meanings across the Chinese elemental system uses wood or tree, but the meanings, attributions to it align well with some of the air attributions and other folk, pagan and other elemental systems across the world, to some extent. Obviously, there's nuance. So both hexagrams have the sun element in them, and the difference is what's below the sun, either water or air. In 49, we have that image of the lake, and the sun is illuminating. This hidden process is becoming visible, the hidden growth that I was speaking about earlier. And that reflection reveals reflecting on it, like it's we are reflecting and seeing something finally that has been true for a long time, maybe, or for a while at least. And, the emperor was already naked, or the institution was already exhausted, or our self has begun to grow beyond an identity that we once inhabited. And so in this case, fire or sun is not creating the revolution or the change. It's simply showing it, revealing it. I think spring is a great manifestation of the sort of gesture of revolution described, intended by this hexagram that it's intending to teach us, right? Literally the revolution of the earth around the sun is spring. Spring is this critical point of change where the whole world seems to be transforming into something new or awakening from a sort of dormant state. And the sun and the rain, water, are combined to awaken this world from its slumber. So, we can't make spring happen. It's just inevitable, like I said before. And no amount of effort on our parts is going to force a flower to bloom or an egg to hatch or the caterpillar to start to build its cocoon. These transformations sort of unfold according to conditions, according to their own time. That's just the season for it. It is the right season for change. So part of the teaching here is not to force your revolution, but to just recognize when it's time for it, to understand that the timing is right. And then, of course, right next to it, 50, hexagram 50, we have this vessel. And in this one, we have the sun over air, and that air is feeding a fire. It's the fuel. There's a chemical reaction which becomes a spark for the actual transformation. And this vessel or cauldron is not just any cauldron, but it's the special one. It's the one we use for preparing offerings to the gods. And we might say that 49 is, seeing what must change. And then 50 here is transforming that change, making that change into something worthy. Not just an uncontrolled change or an uncontrolled fire, but a very intentional one. And the vessel gives it its form. It's protecting and carrying forward this thing, this transforming thing. There's a traditional Chinese festival where women, the people dress up in animal skins. They put them on and they do dances and they do divination for the coming year. And during this festival's metals are melted down, sort of demonstrating this liminal flux place, the caterpillar goo, if you will. And hexagram 40, sometimes called molting, which I think is a great word when we think of the molten metal, right? And 50 cauldron are sort of the perfect, this festival is kind of a perfect literal embodiment of what they are trying to teach us. It sort of becomes this picture for it. So, that molten metal in this festival literally becomes the vessel that will be used for the rituals for that new year. They'll carry the rites on in the new year. So the changing molten state becomes the vessel. The caterpillar reforms itself, right? You are your own vessel in that sort of picture, I guess. And again, revolution, not this overthrowing of something, but this molting process. I'm going to return to the snake for a minute. So, I think of the caterpillar as this really inspiring example, natural example of this process. And the snake is actually like the image, like the Chinese symbol for hexagram 49 is like the molting snake. And it doesn't become anything different than what it was before. So it maybe like a little less exciting. But it's a good example of sort of setting this polarity aside, or setting up an example of the vessel and the life, right? The snake is alive, and the snake leaves the vessel more alive maybe than it was, but not any different, not a different creature. More snaky, bigger snake. I don't know. And then what's left is the skin. And it's clearly just skin. It's nothing else. That's where like the sacredness of this vessel is that it has life in it, that it's actually literally formed from growth forces, from this current, from this pushing out our awareness, or having a revolution of thought, a revelation, I guess, a new way of being in the world, is what keeps it alive. And because of what it's carrying is what makes this the sacred cauldron, not just like the empty snake skin, right? I don't know if that makes sense. But the next thing I want to move into is sort of this idea of the vessel we create, the vessels we inhabit. And like making that distinction between when it's a sacred vessel and it's just a skin. And I think of culture as a good way to kind of look at this spiritual teaching out in the world rather than just how it naturally embodies in the images of nature around us. So a cult or culture is, the word culture has at its root the word cult. And, we think of a lot of things when we think of the word cult, but in its essence, what it is it's a ritual practice that is shared in a group of people or a group of people who share ritual practices, right? And culture is something that happens when those practices become inherited. And civilization is what happens when those inheritance accumulate over many generations and then are kind of embedded and assumed in our landscape, our institutions and our technologies and our social expectations, right? And the word culture shares roots with words like cultivation and horticulture and agriculture, because culture is something that we grow. It's one of the ways we carry wisdom forward, and we sort of inherit these rituals and stories and institutions and structures and moral codes and religious traditions. We inherit them over time. They are vessels we have created, and these vessels sometimes serve life and sometimes obstruct it. They carried our growth forward for a time. We were able to share it with our children. But eventually we have to really question, every vessel should face the question, is it serving life? Is it a sacred vessel or an old skin that we need to kind of slough off? Because life changes, conditions change, and when these forms remain too long, sometimes that form that protected life becomes it's squashing life, right? And it's not a bad judgment on the skin or the form or the vessel or whatever. It's just a judgment on, it's just an inevitable thing due to growth. Growth is continuing. Life is changing. Life is existing. It's being life instead of not life, So that's something that I was kind of thinking about. And if you look specifically, for me, and a personal example, the institution of marriage. I've been reflecting on this in my own life. And I've found myself questioning cultural assumptions that I inherited as a mother and a wife without ever consciously choosing them. These assumptions aren't inherently bad. Like I said, the skin isn't bad. There's just growth happening, right, for me. And I realized I had accepted all of these assumptions as defaults, right? I had just assumed them instead of chosen them. And mistaken this sort of inherited institution as inevitable. But, as I look at expectations, there's ideas about what's expected of my time, what defines a partnership, how families are supposed to look, responsibilities, sacrifices, these things all get kind of packaged together. And I spent most of my life not stopping and asking where these ideas came from, whether they were serving life within me being alive, or whether they reflected values that I consciously held. And so that's kind of, something I've had to gradually shed as I've matured and reflected and understood myself, and what is living in me. Not rejecting outright every aspect of this institution, but examining it and holding up to that fire, the sun, the light reflecting, to ask which parts are still alive, which parts might have been formed under conditions that don't really exist anymore or shouldn't exist anymore. And some of those things kind of prove worth keeping and some don't. The important thing is to kind of recognize the choice rather than assume. And I have a kind of developed a list of questions that emerged in me as I was undergoing this examination for myself, about this cultural vessel that I occupy as a woman in the world. And whether it's protecting life for me or smothering it. Some of these questions are, what does it mean to be a good woman? Who taught me that definition? What qualities was I cultivated to embody, and who benefits from that cultivation? Which responsibilities have I chosen and which have simply accumulated around me? How much of my time belongs to me? What parts of my identity belong to me and what parts belong to roles that I have simply come to occupy? Uh, are there qualities of myself that have been neglected or pruned away, or parts of myself that were never given a chance to grow? What desires have I set aside because I was concerned they might be inconvenient to others around me? What parts of myself became dormant in order to meet social expectations? And do I meet expectations because I genuinely value them, or because I never imagined or, conceived of another option, or the idea that I might should question them? And so, what sacrifices am I expected to make? Who's expecting that? Do these sacrifices serve life or preserve an outmoded culture? And so, yeah, those are the things kind of living in me right now as I kind of like test my vessel and reform it, so to speak. When you look at molting or revolution in this way as a process of melting and reforming cultural expectations, in order to sustain life, like aliveness, a soul that is living, then the idea of revolution that's described here in Hexagram 49 is, not, like I said, looking a lot less like a rebellion and a lot more like discernment, a questioning or choice making process that is in tune with nature, in tune with what is natural and alive, right? I'd like to close the poem. This is Sweet Darkness by David White. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your wound tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you.